So here is an example in my research of, well, they said a seemingly normal teenager that within 2 years started turning into this. See, the fuck switcher schizo out stuff that I researched that S&M clubs were doing to people in ways has people being like this. And this is where, upon seeing that stuff on dark web, I started to realize that potential people in the diagnosis of schizophrenia could potentially be victims of a massive SRA abuse that ruins the psyche so much that it essentially causes stuff like this to start happening. And so the fuck switcher schizo stuff, that if you ask like a, say, an ex-Green Beret that's a psychologist, the tender psyche fuck switcher schizo stuff, that is this. And now here is a prime example of what brain scramble or whatever can cause. It's where they just violently destroy it, almost damn near destroys the fucking psyche when they do this S&M method that they call brain scramble. And from that, I started to notice these types of things coming from that, and then that essentially turned into my theoretical association to this type of stuff coming from a massive satanic ritual abuse method. This is what the induced personality disorder theoretical idea I was doing is. And that I mean, seriously, so it's like, here is like where most doctors would just view this as like a genetic schizophrenia, but see, in the opening credits, this is what I know. I just wanted to show what fuck switchers psyche people are like, okay? With that, in the opening credits, it explains that he was a seemingly normal human being and that within 2 years started turning into this. That's the kind of stuff where seemingly normal S&M clubbers all of a sudden start turning into this type of stuff. And then that is where I had seen the abuse that happened to some of them that then led into them turning into this type of shit. And so then that's when I started to realize that even this person might be like a potential like child MK Ultra style victim potentially, and that a lot of times when they freak out, they scramble their psyche to make them turn into this in ways, because that's essentially what the S&M was doing that for. See, a lot of times they would get like deep inside of a hacker S&M, and then they would find out that they were doing like Islamic terrorist or Russian intelligence type of stuff, and then they would freak out, and then people would schizo them. And that this is what they kind of turn into when that happens. And a lot of times it's because in the MK Ultra it could have been this person, okay, this is just a what if. In the MK Ultra it could have been this person talking and remembering what could have been government people and becoming a huge liability that then has them doing this type of stuff. It could have been a Nazi group. I mean, I think it's in German. It might be, I can't tell by the accent. It might be Russian or something. But the whole idea is that when they become a liability, sometimes they do these brain scrambles, and that this is kind of the stuff that comes from that, and that when they have women that end up remembering a lot of times they'll be dating people that are way deep inside of an S&M dark web in ways, and then they start and they break up or something, and then that woman becomes a huge liability. This is the kind of stuff that starts to happen sometimes when they do that extreme shit that has them with amnesias and shit like this. And so this is where my research, there's not really much in the like DSM and APA and the Oxford world on this stuff. And then I was seeing this stuff coming from people that were getting the horrible satanic fuck switch and shit done to them. And then eventually they would kind of turn into this. And so, I mean, that's pretty much, you see that they essentially have forms of Tourette's. That's kind of what this stuff is. It scrambles the brain so much that it pretty much causes a form of Tourette's, an uncontrollable kind of movement. This is like where my own victimization as a child has me with forms of Tourette's in ways that stem from the psychological abuse that I received. But see, I never turned into this. So the reality is that a lot of times children, some have such an elastic psyche and such an ability to block memories and stuff that a lot of times that stuff that they do to very young children doesn't end up outputting like this. And it has a lot to do with the elastic aspects of the developing psyche itself. And so that is basically how I would explain why I never, from my SRA abuse, why I never turned into anything like this. And that it's my theory that potentially the people that by the time they're 14 or 15 or something, that essentially they potentially are still being like psychologically abused in the satanic sex slaving methodology, and that's kind of where, like, these people, like, here's a high probability. This is going to be a high probability.
Latest. Are people afraid of you, Beth?
Here's a high probability SRA victim.
Blue eyes shocked American society after this documentary about her life was broadcasted on television. Undaunted and bored, Beth recounted how she tried to murder her younger brother when she was going to kill their parents, and why she had stolen knives from the family kitchen.
See, that's the kind of demented shit that goes into what they do to children. And then they start thinking like that and shit, okay? So that's like where somebody like that falls directly into my high probability belief in being a satanically, like the MK Ultra kind of shit. It's like that. And that more than likely there would have been at some point a babysitter or something like that, would have potentially done that at some point in that little girl's early life, and that's the kind of stuff that like they used to call me Satan, because essentially, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be like that, but some of the other kids would be. And then I was somewhat trained to be snapping them out of that type of shit whenever I would notice it. It always happened in the middle of the night, okay? It did. Always. And so that is like where in my research, you know, it's where little children just don't naturally have schizophrenia that has them being little evil children. It's usually there's an outward influence that builds them into that type of shit in ways. And so that's the kind of shit that when it becomes like, I mean, a lot of these are essentially the types of stuff that I noticed as a child and SRA victims and shit, okay?
To teach.
A lot of this type of shit.
So are the training 1 years?
And a lot of the times they build like a cognitiveness that causes them to not really have a way of speaking in a normal grammatical kind of a way and stuff. And that's the kind of shit that, you know, this is where I started to see the association of the things that I saw as a child, the things that I saw out of these broadcasted fucking exploitations on dark web, and that then here's like essentially people that come from an era of like the MK Ultra shit. And that then there seems to be similarities between, and that then I know what those fucking dumb S&Ms do. And that then I start to notice that a lot of the people that emerge from those end up being kind of like these people a little bit. And so that is all it really takes for like an intellectual genius to start to theoreticize about the potentials for what actually causes a lot of this stuff. Like, see, when they start getting paranoid, a lot of times their cognitive issue is that they're paranoid of being victimized and that they can't necessarily like wrap their paranoia around why they're paranoid based on the amnesias and abuse. They just know that they're afraid for some potentially credible reason. They just can't place the memory around it. And a lot of times it's a suppressed memory, and then it feeds a paranoia of some sort that then the person themselves doesn't understand. And then essentially there's not much in psychiatry about this shit. And then it just becomes the label of paranoid schizophrenia. And that is kind of like where essentially there's like these prostitutes that are like really paranoid all the time and they don't really have any explanation for it. And then these assholes were broadcasting rape switching them for years and shit. And then they showed everybody like what the chick was like at the beginning. Then they showed after they raped them a shit ton of times what they're like at the end. And then some cop was sitting around calling them a paranoid schizophrenic based on credible fear that they can't wrap around. There's amnesia of what they're afraid of, but they know that they're supposed to be afraid of those people. That's a natural reaction that they merely have like amnesias of, okay? They have amnesias of the abusers, but that they know that they should be afraid and aware of those people as a natural fight and flight response, okay? And so that's kind of like where this stuff ends up being pretty much like, a lot of this stuff ends up being like so similar to what these hookup sites that abuse women in a rape way and shit. It ends up being, you know, because it's just, schizophrenia is not contagious. Okay? It's not. And when too many people all of a sudden just start having schizophrenia and shit like that are normal as fuck. These people, most of them, would have shown signs of that stuff as children. It's kind of the indicative aspects to schizophrenia. And then a lot of these people are showing signs of that after having completely normal childhoods, after having completely normal lives in their 20s, and then all of a sudden they're just magically exhibiting signs of schizophrenia after these assholes are basically broadcasting everywhere how they fucking raped them over and over again into an amnesia, and then they sit around labeling them as paranoid schizos at the end. So that's like where the things that I was able to see was like basically, I seen the same shit. And then they pretty much exhibit signs of being a schizophrenic after that shit. And so, and like, here's other aspects. The abusers usually end up exhibiting signs like this. Alright? And so that's what I know is that pretty much you people like call someone either a schizophrenic or a psychopath all the time. And it's like pretty much like the antisocial personality disorder. This person won't have any ability of having any care or pathos or empathy. That is what will define him. And that's pretty much where you guys like had these like weird discussions in the past about how don't you people realize that I attempt to build real therapy ideas, new modern therapy ideas for people like this? That is ultimate empathy. That is ultimate pathos. And see, that's where you guys pretty much, I know, it's like you guys have two Jews, Satan Jew outputs if you Satan say fucking sexless, either a schizo or a psychopath. And that essentially what that represents is either an abuser or a victim. And that's where you people may not realize that just the mere fact of my wife doing that stuff, is taking my kid and trying. The whole idea is that I've done everything possible to have understanding and pathos and care and love still for that woman. And so that's kind of like where I really kind of wonder, because you people, here's somebody that here's like, well, I mean, she might have been an abuser of somebody or something like that, but like pretty much like I noticed all the cops that were like calling everyone a schizo or something, they all exhibit antisocial personality disorder.
Can you tell us what they are?
Basically, you're the sociopath. And so that's where they don't care about those people whatsoever. They're also the ones that go around and go, oh, he's talking about this. Oh, well, we can't help him. I guess we just sit around and let him get tortured to death in speakers. That is essentially sociopath or antisocial. See, when they just like, well, we marked him up, there's nothing we can do. I guess we'll just sit around and wait for him to kill himself. That's basically where you cops are seeing. Basically, that is what labels all of you as sociopaths. And that I basically saw you people just writing off women like, oh, yeah, she did this or something, and didn't suck this asshole's dick, and pretty much messes up her profile. Yeah, I guess nothing we could do. We'll just go help someone else, not care, not tell anybody.
Did he say anything to you?
That is like what defines sociopath in ways. Your guys' complete inability of having any empathy or pathos for those people that you guys were just throwing away to the wind kind of shit. And that you Mormon temples were doing the same fucking thing. And so, yeah. See, you people are abusers and lack any real emotion. That is what makes you people essentially sociopaths. Alright? And that is kind of what that term fucking means, okay? So, if you guys want to understand what you guys sit around claiming about other people, just remember that people that try and pass themselves off as intellectuals in psychology that literally have no comprehension into what the word sociopath means, or schizophrenia, that is where every single person that you guys called a schizo is literally has a high probability of just being a victim of a satanic S&M. And every one of you that go around finding people getting sound tortured on dark web or something, and then you write people off of getting any help, and then you guys don't tell anybody, those are where all of you that do that are literally labeled as the abusers. If you guys want to do twos and stuff. So, that's like where essentially what the psychological output of the abusive satanic sex slaver basically has them turning into a sociopath in a true DSM kind of lacking empathy and pathos kind of way, which is basically where sociopaths won't really give a fuck if somebody gets tortured into suicide and shit. Right? And that, I attempt to explain all the research that I could figure out about where and what causes the sound torture, and that basically a lot of people are just sitting there with all these cops who know that they got people fucking with them in speakers who refuse to tell anybody, and then that is where essentially I know that those cops, they don't have any care for those people whatsoever, just like you fucking Mormons and shit that are trying to act all nice about this doing the same fucking thing. You people merely want them to be silenced for some reason, and then you people want to sit around and have them be silent and never be talking about how you guys are torturing them into suicide in little groups and shit. And then your guys is little stupid little cops that just don't give a fuck about the person for some sort of weird data mine reason that makes no fucking sense. That's the kind of optimization of sociopathness, psychoness that you guys do in a satanic S&M club filled with fucking psychos. See, you guys all get leadership by optimizing your fucking psychoness. So, that is where, you people pretty much built your psyches into, I guess it's antisocial personality disorder. Okay? Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, sociopath is a more accurate term, but I think the antisocial aspects are probably where they're not supposed to be interacting with society, essentially. Something that goes counter to the societal pathos of a well-rounded person I mean, that's how I would view that term, but that is where they essentially develop a personality disorder that I would call sociopath personality disorder. That would be a more probably better understood explanation for what their interactions in satanic S&M essentially over time builds the personality disorder based on their sociopathic abilities to be doing that stuff so often that it feeds like an addictive sociopathness in them that eventually turns into somewhat of a personality disorder, basically. That where those people probably in the past, before being unfettered with their ability to like psychotically torture people for fun and to do fucked up fucking shit all the fucking time. See, in society, before they got into those dark webs like that, they would have probably exhibited normality in life, and that then, when allowed to be engaged in full spectrum sociopathic behavior for so long, that is really what slowly grooms and builds the personality disorder of what they suffer from, which is being a sociopath.